Hello, everybody. This is Joshua Hatton with the One Nation Under Whiskey podcast. I'm joined today, and I'm joined as always by my good friend, Jessica Rabbit Lomas. Surprise, surprise, surprise. I've got a little jab into Jason, Neil, Patrick, Harris, Johnston, Yellen.
Thank you. Thank you. It's also good to be here with Joshua Hatton and Jessica Rabbit Lomas.
You're welcome.
Jess, it's so rare. I shouldn't say it's rare that we have you on the podcast. I guess statistically speaking, it's rare to have you on, but it's always a pleasure to have you on the podcast.
No, thanks. I would say it was more like quality over quantity or something.
That doesn't say much about the two of us, because we're here all the bloody time.
It's going to make for a great episode when it's just a really awkward silence and somebody whistling through their teeth like...
Yep, Jess sitting here talking to herself on a recording. Good luck. Godspeed.
So, we've got a lot of things to cover today. We have an interview to get to. We've got news to get to. But I wanted to bring up, if you don't mind, the fact that you have been gallivanting a little bit. You were in Germany, showing off some of our new wares. Yeah. And I didn't know if you wanted to highlight some of the fun times you had in Germany.
Some of the fun times. I had so many fun times in Germany. I feel like this is the start of a classic Shaggy Dog's tale. You know, I set off from my house one classic Glaswegian cold and wet and rainy morning. It was a baking 9 degrees. I flew to Berlin and I got off a plane and it was, to my surprise, 32 degrees and extremely sunny. And I got off the plane, a bit like, you know, when you come out of the cinema, if you've ever gone to a screening in the afternoon and you come out and you're like, oh, no. That's how every single British person got off that plane when we touched down in Berlin Airport. Like, what is this? Why is it warm?
Just to be clear for our American listeners, when Jess is talking 8 degrees and 32 degrees, that is, of course, Kelvin. I mean, Celsius.
Yeah, I was going to say, could you...
172 Kelvin?
Could you please translate that into American old money Fahrenheit? I don't know what it is.
You went from about 50 to about 80.
Okay. It felt like 80 degrees Celsius when I got off the plane. It was so shocking to me. Like, but it was lovely. And so we were taking part in a whiskey festival just outside Berlin called Köpenicker. And it was really fun. It was a festival format that I've not done ever. Now I'm saying this out loud. Everything was in like kind of little marquees outside in like a nice kind of courtyard. So we weren't inside. Lots of whiskey festival goers will, of course, been to the traditional football stadium, you know, big exhibition room space type setup. Everybody had their own marquee, and then we had a long table with Prineus, our importers, and it was really lovely. What was really funny is my continued complaint as a whiskey festival attendee is that there's never enough places to sit down because, you know, I'm old now and I like to have a sit down with my whiskey. This festival, we were in front of a fire pit, which I need to remind you, it was already roasting. We didn't need a fire pit, but it was lovely. Fire pit, and there was some really nice kind of like almost deck chairs.
You sure you didn't get a plane to hell, Jess?
No, I was delighted, man. I was spending the whole time being like, whilst I feel like I am too hot, I know that in 3 days' time I'm going to be complaining that it's not even remotely warm anymore. So I was trying to absorb the vibes.
Fire pits.
Yeah, right. Very, very cozy.
Stone near to you?
No, but it was just really lovely.
So the frying pan into the fire. That's what it sounds like.
I'm waiting for it. Was Germany. I'm waiting for you to make some sort of sausage jokes that I can't. The listeners can stitch that together themselves.
We're both vegetarian, yeah. Listeners are going to have to insert their own sausage humour here.
There we go.
Insert your own sausage humour, indeed. Yeah.
Wow. Did anybody have like 3 minutes into this recording paging HR? If you did, write that down on your scorecard immediately.
Everybody. It's a drinking game. Paging HR. Drink.
So it was really nice, and there was people sat with just kind of like chilling out groups in front of where we were. It was a nice kind of obviously little meeting point. They had live music. Nice. They had a woman who had made ice cream using whiskey. 10 points to her. Delicious. We had like a Lafroig ice cream, and then there was like a hazelnut smoky chocolate thing. Which you may have seen. I posted a picture of myself in one of the deck chairs eating an ice cream. So that was, very unexpected. Definitely occurs in Scotland in September. So, we poured lots of whiskey. Why were we there? Whiskey. Met lots of excited people who were very familiar with this festival, which seems to have been going for quite a while. I did a masterclass. Little
beauty. Did you need a translator? Just out of curiosity, or was English a fairly commonly spoken language at the festival?
I was going to give you a witty retort in German. No, I did not need a translator. My extremely limited German, which is sort of like yes, no, 2 sausages and a beer, please, got me through fine. It's probably more that everybody speaks exceptional English than my terrible attempts at German. But it's funny, a lot of my kind of school German did come back to me. I felt like I was understanding good chunks of what was happening, just a bit kind of tongue-tied and not necessarily able to like reply in English. Oh, German, sorry. I replied in English, obviously. I didn't lose the ability to speak that as well.
I didn't feel the need to even reply.
Yeah, I just did it all in mime.
English, German.
Entire weekend in mime.
That's why you brought the baguettes with you. Okay.
Jess is doing her sausage mime right now. This is not appropriate, Jess.
Just that speed dial through to HR.
That's not a sausage.
So are they out of office? I've got an out of office from HR. I think we'll be okay. I think we're okay. It was really lovely, and it was great to be back with the Prenius team. It was great to meet some new SCN fans. I'm going to call them fans.
What did you pour and how were they received?
Pop quiz. We poured some things from the previous release. So there was actually, and this is going to really upset nearly everybody, there was some of our delicious Bowmore on the table.
The 11-year-old sherry cask one.
The one that is delicious.
Yep.
And I had several discussions with people who were very, I'm going to say, skeptical of Bowmore, because maybe they only know it from this previous era of the Joshua Hatton fan club, slightly soapier levels of Bowmore. There were several people.
Oh, so the best era.
Several people I had to nearly forcibly make them drink it. And then they all said, no, this is really delicious. So don't know if it's because they're a bit scared of me or if it's because the whiskey's genuinely brilliant. I'd like to think it's the second one of them.
And that's David Turner era.
Right.
Bowmore,
and that was my
Point.
selling point, was that I had taken it to Isla and I had got the thumbs up from David, who said it was really good. And I said, thank you very much. We just put our names on it. Thank you.
I can imagine David Turner saying really good in a really flat tone of voice.
That is the level
really
of approval
good.
I'm looking for. Somebody who, if you're in America, you'd be really freaked out this guy hates it. But I know that's like full endorsement. That's the praise I'm seeking.
Yeah. I'm glowing right now from that praise.
That's wonderful. When I poured it for him, I told him on Isla that I was really nervous about giving him some of this. I said, I'm really worried that you're... Just be honest with me, I can handle it. I was fingers crossed behind my back. And he was delighted with it. So I am...
Awesome. Delighted.
I am.
Really good.
He's like, I made really good whiskey. Good job.
Yeah, that's exactly... I went full American. I was like, well, you're welcome. Thank you so much. So I think as long as he's given it a thumbs up, then I'm very happy with that. What else did we pour on the table? We poured... we had a couple of kind of like nice callbacks to previous releases. We had some McMillan, which was obviously hot topic whiskey, given their recent news announcements. And what else do we have in there? We had some of the linkwood that was in French oak, and I'm not trying to think what else I was pouring in the masterclass.
I'm just thinking about the linkwood in French oak. We've been going around pouring the
American
California wine cask linkwood, and referring to the overseas French oak version.
Oh, my favorite. I think that,
linkwood.
and I've said that about nearly all of the ones from the release, just to form the ultimate incomplete list of things. It was, one of my favorite releases. We also had the McMillan. We had Crofton Gear 18-year-old, and we had some of that Ardnah Merkin 6-year-old, which was. Every time I pour it, I'm like, God, we did I picked a really good cask there. I have to whisper that bit because it's obviously a team effort. This is a team sport.
Hey, take it where you can get it. You went to the distillery. You crawled across casks and corners of warehouses.
Literally.
Build up
I
the
did
romance.
literally nearly get stuck on top of a cask, which would have been very awkward, and I've made I'm pretty sure Connell definitely would have taken photographs of me like some sort of beached whale on the top of a cask screaming, "Help, get me down." That'd have been...
Oh my gosh. Is this where I insert the audio from Horrible Bosses about bending you over a barrel and showing you the 50 states?
But I mean, you can.
I'm paging HR.
Paging HR.
And the final one from that list, we had some of the I was calling it dark and dirty Daluin, that we had for this side of the pond. So not the 9-year-old that went to the US, the 13 that was here. So it was a really great weekend, just kind of pouring whiskies, chatting. It was really lovely to be next to Lorena from Lindor's Abbey. She is their master blender. We have previously met at a whiskey judging competition, but it was really nice to spend a weekend next to her. And it's always so exciting to me to listen to people who are directly influencing, the liquid from the get-go. So hearing kind of her story and what she's looking for, and she's got a couple of projects that she's really passionate about, working with some really funky cask types. So that was really funny listening to her, getting people excited about these casks and what's coming from Lindor's Abbey. I also had our, I'm going to call them sister brand, Tim there from JG Thompson. He was away down the other end, but kept us dancing all weekend. And then obviously the lovely guys from Prineus, keeping us topped up. It's the only festival I work at where they have a dedicated beer fridge.
Oh my gosh.
So take note to all our other markets. Beer fridge is a great idea, especially when it's really hot. There's also sweets. And Heiko always brings a bag of marzipan, because that's not too far from where they are in Kiel. Gerd and Thomas kept me very busy. So thanks so much to the Prineus boys. It was nice to hang out with you.
Sounds like a very good use of your time.
Yeah, it was great. Well, I always think pouring whiskey at festivals is a great use of time. It's always good to hear what people think.
Exactly correct.
I especially enjoy German brutal honesty. So there was a few moments where I think maybe they thought I was really upset, and there was some people saying, "No, I'm just telling you how it is." I said, "That's great. We're all different. It'd be very boring if we all like the same whiskey." So yeah. I also have to give a special mention before we move on to a bunch of Danish guys who came to the table and brought me some of the most mind-blowing whiskies I've drunk in a long time. Because apparently it's really normal to come to a whiskey festival with a backpack of your own whiskey, which contains things like Rare Malts 1974 Brewers, 1980 Glenlockies, 1980s Dallas Dews. No, it's just regular. And 1989 Bowmores. Just regular everyday drinking whiskies. So,
my gosh.
What a treat.
How was the floral quality of the 1989 Bowmore?
I think it was...
Don't spare any detail.
Don't spare any details. I think it was quite like our woodcut one. It had a tiny bit in it, but not... Oh. For the listeners of the podcast on this audio format, Jason is pointing at the woodcut series behind his shoulder. It was...
You can tell them how little remains in there, Jess.
There's basically one dram just for me. Yeah.
Next time.
Okay. Right, I'm just putting my shoes on. I'll be around in half an hour. So it wasn't that floral. I think it was a bit like our woodcut. There was a tiny touch of it, but certainly I've had much more Parma Violet based examples of Bowmore. So if you were looking for FWP in that one, it was a Cadenhead's bottling. If you're looking for FWP in that, you were going to be a bit let down, I think. But as somebody who wanted to drink delicious Bowmore from their birth year, I was delighted. So,
do you remember the bottling year? Okay, if you don't, just curious.
It was a couple of years old, I think, by the time they had brought it.
Not that I'm online looking for it right now.
Googling for it right this second.
Bowmore 89.
And the cask number.
It was from 2015. It was a 26-year-old.
2015. Okay, when did we bottle our 89 woodcut? 2019.
19. Yeah, it was 2019 because it was a 30-year-old, right?
Full 30.
Yep.
Well, yep. Well done. Well done.
Yep.
There you go. Brilliant. Okay, thank you. I can complete my internet search now.
In your own time.
So, obviously, lots to catch us up on Germany, so I really appreciate that. I know after the interview, you'll be catching us up on some new global releases. I'm really excited to talk about, to dram along with you.
Very exciting.
But we've got Jonny and Angus from Kythe Distillery, and I wonder if you could just give us a little primer on what we're about to hear.
What you're about to hear is three of us sat around Angus's kitchen table discussing Kythe and a pretty cool idea that's taken a long time to come to fruition, and the distillery that the two of them are building together along with another partner, but you'll get to that in the interview. And we just kind of had a little discussion, and then Angus, who is a real wizard for pulling out very old bottles from his cabinet, forced me, listeners of the podcast, he forced me to try some really old, delicious whiskies. And it was really awful, but I did it just for the podcast. And you'll be able to judge how terrible they were.
Oh, we're teased. We're suitably teased right about now.
Yeah, so there was a little discussion about how that's sort of helping to shape what they're looking to do. So, yeah, it was a good chit chat. I hope I'll let you judge that then.
All right. Well, beauty. Let's let our listeners judge too, and hand it off to you, Jonny, and Angus.
Hello, you are joining me from deepest, darkest Fife, and I'm here today to speak to two gentlemen about a very exciting project. I'm going to get them to introduce themselves in a second. We are here to discuss Kythe Distillery, so I will let which one of you two win the thumb war, which is currently happening. You can speak first.
I've clearly got the more muscular thumbs.
Okay, well done.
Wiry thumbs, yeah, more vicious thumbs certainly. Anyway,
gnarly, some might say.
My name's Jonny McMillan. I'm 1/3 of the directors of Kythe. I used to work for Berry Brothers and Rudd as their cask buyer for a good number of years, and also did Dramboree with a friend, and Whisky Show Old and Rare with Angus. And I would also just like to add that we are in Fife, which is where Angus's beautiful home is, but the distillery, in fact, is not in Fife. The distillery is very much in Perthshire, in the Highlands, safely across the Highland boundary. It is not a Fife distillery. Sorry, Francis.
And I'm Angus MacRaild, and I'm also 1/3 director of Kythe Distillery. And I also am a director of Decadent Drinks, independent bottler, and occasionally a writer. And yeah, as Jonny mentioned, we've done Old and Rare Whisky Show together in the past as well. And yeah, that's me.
That's good, extensive CV presentation. Well done. You've learnt that's one of my favourite bits of The Apprentice, is where they go through their CVs and they're like, I was chief leader of the Boy Scouts. And then like Claude does an investigation. It turns out you were never even in the Scouts. So yeah, that's very good. Well done. So 2/3 of the Kythe Distillery. I have seen recently you guys have started making a bit of progress. You made a series of big announcements a while back ago about the project and what you were aiming to get out of it. But I've got you here today to talk about a little bit about that, in case we have any Padcast listeners who have been living under a rock and have not really thought about, Kythe or Perthshire, Perthshire. So I was thinking maybe one of you could give us just a kind of like get us up to date. Where are we at?
So yeah, we've now started on site. Started a couple of months ago. The distillery is very much a kind of functional agricultural distillery. We're not building a kind of grand design with like lifts and flares and dancing girls or anything. It's two pre-existing barns. So we're using the steel frames already there. We're using the concrete that's already there. So it's a pretty basic build. All the energy is kind of going into the plant that's inside. We're a couple of months in now. The kind of construction bit is well underway, and the process should start going in towards the end of this month, end of September, with the refractory, and then the stills hopefully going in November, and the plant commissioning early 2025, and hopefully filling our first casks kind of first half of 2025.
So soon. That's all very real for a project that seems like it took you guys maybe a little while to get to this point of being ready to start commissioning and production.
Yeah, it took us around about 2 hours to come up with the concept and 11 years to actually get to the point of being in construction. So yeah, it's been quite a long road here. I think first half of that, since we came up with this idea, we'd like to have a distillery and we want to make this type of whiskey, was just figuring out how to do it and where on earth do you start when, Jonny and I are not rich, we don't have money. A lot of distilleries, when they start, they're often driven by people that have cash or are coming off the back of long careers in the industry, can raise capital, or people that own land, or kind of a mix of all three. And we had none of that. All we had was a bit of knowledge and some ideas. And so it was a long learning process with quite a few false starts and, trying to get to the point of having a site, having some funding, all this stuff. And the game changer really for us was when our third business partner, Aaron Chan, came on board with the project, initially as an investor and then really more as like a full director and cornerstone investor for us. And he really had the missing thing which we lacked, which was good financial background and acumen and real
common sense.
Just sort of a lot of business experience and the ability to help focus our ideas. And so that really is where kind of this version of the project came from. We stripped everything back that wasn't necessary, and we just thought, right, what's the core most important thing here? It's let's make old style Highland malt whiskey, and let's design the right kit and site and process and everything that can achieve that. So that's and that, since Aaron came on board and helped us with that, has been the game changer, and that's where everything really picked up over the last few years, and that sort of brings us up to where we are now.
That's quite a refreshing way to think about it, I think, because modern distilleries now are so much based on, maybe not dancing go-go girls, but definitely something, it's a destination.
Jonny's got a penny.
Oh, okay. Well, that brings me to my second point in a sec, but it's quite an interesting ethos, because now I think people tend to think of distilleries as such a destination that I think you could almost be forgiven for the whiskey and the liquid actually being second place. There's a few distilleries that have popped up that are in very obvious tourist locations, so that you get passing busloads of tourists or something coming in, which, although now I've just heard there are dancing go-go girls, I was told, and I have seen, that there will be no visitor facilities, no tea rooms. I won't be able to get a distillery tea towel. That's quite upsetting as a...
There'll be some distillery tea towels, but they will just be unbranded tea towels that get used for traditional tea towel function. So you can have one of those in the future if you really...
Only if you sign it with a Sharpie.
Yeah, maybe. Okay.
Like a gold Sharpie.
Investment grade tea towel. No, we didn't want to do... So all the money on this project has gone into this kind of key eventual objective, which is, we want to make a certain style of whiskey, a certain quality of whiskey, and we've got this theory essentially of how to go about that and how to achieve that. And we felt things like trying to embrace the tourism angle, which the last few years has shown how fragile that is in Scotland, and how I think it's very dangerous to make too many assumptions about that being a part of your business or a predictable part of a business. So we eschewed that, and we definitely didn't want to make gin, because it's it just absorbs your time and focus, when what you really want to be doing is focusing on making whiskey, learning how to get better at making that whiskey, and making more of that whiskey to lay down for the future, and have a stronger business in the long term. So, and I think it just jarred with our message about what we're trying to do, particularly with regards to quality. If you say we're making this incredible, almost ruthlessly ideologically sculpted, beautiful distillate, and we're putting it into these really carefully chosen and managed casks and blah, 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 and we're also doing this gin stuff on the side, it just really makes sense for us. So yeah, no tourists, no gin, just a small, still commercial scale, but modest, functional, working, grubby, very carefully thought through and designed distillery.
Okay, so now that I've put away my diary to come and visit you and do a top-notch connoisseur's tour, which is quite exciting. You
can probably come for a visit, Jess.
Okay, don't tell anybody else listening to the podcast that.
Don't tell anyone.
Okay, no one's listening. But the podcast listeners who are listening, who've just woken up at this point, are always very interested in sort of very nerdy, specific details. So you guys seem like the right people to chat to about this, because I know that you have a couple of, especially unusual for Scotland, although I suspect generally the world of Scotch, and malt whiskey, of course, a couple of different pieces of equipment that you maybe wouldn't find in most of the other Scottish distilleries, starting with some, I don't know, actually maybe you can identify some unusual features that you've got.
Well, I think, I reckon we've put more effort into designing the process for this distillery than any other distillery, in terms of having that really kind of key and singular objective of making a style of whiskey we want to make. We know we want to make old style whiskey. How do we design the plant to ensure we can do that? And definitely the main challenge has been the refractory. So that's the bit that you burn shit in to heat up the wash still. So our wash still will be direct fire, and we believe it's probably the first purpose-built refractory for burning solid fuel. So for us, wood, historically coal, in Scotland for probably 100 years. I mean, we're not sure when the last distillery that built a coal refractory was, but quite a long time ago. And that design process is taken in 5 companies, 3 consultants, just to kind of ensure this. It sounds quite simple: burn some logs, heat some stuff up, but it's in terms of temperature control, having a door that doesn't take your face off. Recirculating flue gas, all this kind of stuff's been
not die,
not die. Yeah,
yes.
Not
a good objective to have.
I mean, we did like a sort of hazard study which encompassed several days and just listed all the ways you could maim yourself in a distillery. But yeah, I think the refractory is probably the most eye-catching bit. But there's we've thought about everything from having an actual mash tun, where most distilleries have a lauter tun, similar but different. So we've got a traditional infusion mash tun, right down to things you would just never think of, like our washbacks fill from the top, which give more aeration in the wort, where most washbacks in modern distilleries fill from the bottom. So it's just all this kind of incredibly nerdy detail, split receivers, you name it, every single part has been thought through and designed with the singular goal of making amazing old style whiskey.
Yeah, I think the thing about making whiskey is that it's not just one thing. There's not one magic bullet or solution. I think it's about judgment and decision making and the accumulative effect of many opportunities throughout the whole production process to make those judgment calls, make those decisions. And we've tried to bear that in mind as we've gone through this whole design process. Every single part, as Jonny says, has been poured over very meticulously and always thought about with what is the solution here that's going to get us most effectively to that objective of astonishing quality old style malt whiskey down the line, years from now.
There's been really no money saved on process. The one example is the transition piece between our line arm coming out and the worm tub outside was, through an oversight, going to be stainless steel. It was going to cost 30 grand to have that transition piece made in hand hammered copper, and we went for that. So there's really no, our stills are coming from Speyside Copper Works, now Forsyth, and Speyside washbacks from JB Vats and Dufton, mash tun from Forsyth, Northern Fabricators. So we're getting top-notch kit. There's no expense spared on plant, but when it comes to the actual building it's in, I don't think we've spent a single penny on anything aesthetic. There's one window in the office. There's no window in the still house. There's no like fountains or anything like that. I don't think we spent any money on aesthetics or any consideration given to aesthetics whatsoever. So it's all the money, all the focus has gone into process, and none on tea rooms or tea towels or cheese boards.
Seems like you've not thought too hard about the old social medias, the Instagrams, no windows.
You wouldn't
my
believe
goodness.
the discussions that have gone on about emoticons and their and their use and or not use. No, we have. I think the thing about Kythe is that what sits behind it is a real depth of thought and a kind of obsessiveness around all these aspects. So, at heart, we are hopefully a company about quality. We want to be a company about quality, quality product, and quality in what we do. And when it comes to that, when it comes to things like social media, we've just started to do sort of regular posts now that planned every sort of couple of weeks, thought through, hopefully thoughtfully, carefully written, saying something meaningful, saying a bit more than usual but not too much. All these sorts of things have been pretty well considered in the terms of what's the bigger picture, what's the long-term plan, what's the grand master plan. And we do want to be the sort of company that everything from the product we make through to how we talk about ourselves and what we say about ourselves is hopefully of meaning to our community that reads it or enjoys it or hopefully eventually drinks it.
I think for me authenticity is crucial here. Angus and I are, and Aaron, we are like dyed in the wool, card carrying, final stage whiskey nerds. There's no doubt about it. And we want to be able to look ourselves in the mirror throughout this process. So for me, just telling the truth of what we're doing, sticking to the like authentic romance of what we're doing is enough. And so we can put out these beautifully written by Angus social media posts, and they're all true. We're not posturing, we're not saying anything that's not true. We've put all this effort in so we can talk about it truthfully, and hopefully that kind of passion, that authenticity comes through.
Yeah, I think it does, and also listening to you talk about it, it's obviously not just a set of words that you've put together for a business plan. It's pretty obvious from everything you guys have got through so far that it's not just an idea that you were like, well, whiskey seems popular in Scotland, we could have a crack at that.
Yeah, I think that was something that I always really put me off Scotch whisky or the Scotch whisky industry. I mean, I've always loved Scotch whisky, the product, but I've never really been much of a fan of the industry, in inverted commas. And everything I've tried to build in my career, and with the business partners that I work with, and now absolutely more than anything else with Kythe, is try to build something where the truth of what you're doing is enough to sell it, and try to build something where you create value through quality, not through a big long plan about volume and expansion. That's that's the thing that underpins Kythe, is that we create a set amount and we control that amount, and we put as much effort as humanly possible into making sure every drop of what we produce is astonishing quality, and then that is what builds the value for the company in the long run.
I like the use of the idea of astonishing quality. Do you have some metrics that we can maybe share with the podcasters about, you're saying astonishing quality, I am sort of pulling your chain a bit, but to the average, perhaps, whiskey consumer who maybe haven't had the privilege of drinking the kind of stuff that I know you two have had in your cupboards and in your glasses, how's that going to be sort of conveyed to the people that eventually, hopefully, are lucky enough to stumble across bottles of Kythe? Is it going to be so unrecognisable to what they are perhaps drinking as a modern drinker?
Yeah, so I think for a modern drinker, they'll notice that what we put out is not dominated lopsidedly by active oak flavouring. I think a lot of active wood is deployed in Scotch whisky maturation now as an agent of flavour rather than an agent of maturation. And I think that people will notice that what we've produced, what we put out, what we sell is something that represents a balance between distillate, charismatic, identifiable distillate with a real DNA about it and a personality and an accent its own, and that gently sculpted and matured by oak, but not in a way where the oak is dominating or aggressive or creating an imbalanced product. I can let you taste something that might illustrate that.
Oh, dear listeners, you can't see these bottles on this table.
Yeah.
Well, it wasn't, but do you know what? We'll just pretend it was. I think you're obviously preaching to the converted here. There's going to be a lot of people who are going to have eyes on you, especially, I know we're talking kind of 10, 15 years ahead of ourselves, but watching it, I mean, what you're talking about is what I regularly joke about as having as a knackered wood series, where everything is just matured in third and fourth fill hogsheads that are very boring. It comes out pale as piss like I am, but it creates character and flavours and complexities in the whiskey that it's not overrun by tannins and very active wood.
Knackered wood is one of my favourite return to phrases in Scotch whisky descriptors, and actually it features on the rear labels of an uncountable number of sponge bottlings, I think. All right, so I'm going to let you try. I'm going to put the microphone down. I'll let you try one thing blind, and then we can try a few other bits and pieces, because this is a good indicator of what I mean by old style whiskey.
Okay, it's stressful.
I'm going to do something which I don't normally do, but it's really a bit annoying, which is say, guess what this is. So
this is my worst nightmare. When people say things like, tell us what it is.
We were out for dinner with one of our investors in Edinburgh, who's a friend of ours, and that was the first thing Angus did to me. I just got back from a weekend in Belgium where I drank gallons of Lambic beer with Billy Abbott and John Beach and all those kind of.
So you had a top performing palate ready to go.
I was ruined, and Angus poured me something blind. I think it was his Springbank bottling. I said, guess that, and clearly I missed by 100 miles and 20 years. All
right, so I've just given you a glass. Now you have to guess what that is.
Oh, no. Okay, well, while I'm scientifically nosing this whiskey in a way that would be great for an Instagram profile picture, you two are going to have to carry on talking about some plans about the distillery. Go.
Well, something that I think is, we haven't spoken about it publicly much yet, but something we put a lot of work into is our plan for wood, and particularly sherry casks. So we've been out to Spain and spent a lot of time developing relationships with a couple of cooperages, and we've got some really interesting casks being seasoned and being sourced, which I think again feed into this idea of thinking through every stage and thinking through in a way of like what's going to get us this old style profile, because obviously with being a sort of distillate being at the heart of what we do, we want to give that a lot of room and a lot of space to breathe, and so we'll be using lots of refill wood. But when it comes to sherry, we do want to have a meaningful component of sherry in the warehouse, and that to form have a meaningful role in the final character of Kythe when it's a single malt in years to come. And so there's some really interesting stuff going to come from what we've been commissioning out in Spain. So that's something that's, I think I'm pretty excited to see eventually arrive.
I guess for me the opposite side of the production process is the barley. So we're really fortunate in that Kythe is on a farm owned by a farmer who's also one of our investors. He's a pretty progressive farmer, and he was delighted to try and grow some Maris Otter for us. So we actually seeded that last year. It's a winter barley, and it was harvested a few weeks ago. We got 70 tonnes of our own Maris Otter. So that should do about a quarter of our production, I think, in the first year. So
that'll form the first runs of spirit next year, and that'll be floor malted for us. And that's really an old 60s brewing varietal that was for making ale and things like that. Really, it was a beer brewing varietal. So it's something which won't yield as much sugar. It'll have a higher proportion of proteins in it. So that's the sort of thing which will mash really well and ferment really well and give us more building blocks to convert to flavour in fermentation stage, which is really sort of fundamental. Again, as another big fundamental component to making this sort of charismatic distillate we want to make.
I've also been fortunate enough to get that grown. So David's has a LEAF accreditation, which is linking environment and farming. So it's kind of regenerative growing, low inputs, less fertilizer, etc. Which is something I think we'd like to move towards over the years. Eventually, having 100% of our barley grown that way on the estate by the farmer.
I think that's really interesting. I was lucky enough to go to the US last year, and I went to the bread labs up in Skagit Valley in Washington State. And it was really interesting talking about kind of grains, but also about this idea of maybe moving away from hyper commercialization, about how to go back to being what I'm going to call gentle growing, like, you know, not so much pressure put on the ground, not so much pressure put on the grains, but also being aware that we're in a very changing world. It's not easy to escape the fact that it's rained for the entirety of whatever summer is meant to be in Scotland. So obviously I can imagine that farmers are looking to trying to find slightly more weather resistant crops and styles of barleys, especially as we're in Scotland talking whiskey, but, you know, grains that are more resistant to the change, not just the traditional, looking at maybe not like diseases and variations, but also fundamentally, if it's going to rain for the whole summer, well, you need to have something to harvest come the end of that. It's interesting to me that you guys are thinking about it in a much more holistic approach. It's not just, we're going to make really nice whiskey having sourced this. It's a step out, like zooming out one step further of, okay, so we want local barley that's accredited in a, you said leaf accreditation, you know, something that we can use to affect flavour before we've even put it anywhere near any equipment.
We both really care about the sustainability and meaningful sort of ethical and authentic green credentials that sit behind this project. Like, neither of us want to be involved in a project that doesn't put that at the heart of what we're doing and make a genuine effort, and so that when we talk about it or have something to say, it's not greenwashing, it's not bullshit. Like, we've looked into it, we've done our best, and we know there's always going to be room for improvements. Like, Scotch whisky is not a particularly, you know, massively environmentally friendly thing to create, but you can do it in a better, more, you know, environmentally considerative fashion, and that's what we're trying to do. And we see ways to even further improve it, you know, down the line as we go along. So it's something that we'll talk about whenever we've got something, you know, meaningful and, you know, demonstrable to say.
And I think it comes back to that idea of a sort of genuine beauty within the product. It's hard to really, you know, drink a glass of whiskey and say, oh, you know, it reminds me of the beauty of Scotland, but the thing's made by like a massive diesel boiler and, you know, pumped out into grain that's just been grown with fertilizer and things. It's difficult to really kind of have genuine kind of authentic beauty behind that, I guess. So yeah, it's a conundrum we both have. I think if our first care here was to do something that's low carbon, good for the environment, don't build a distillery.
Yeah.
That's not our reason for being. But, you know, we want to make amazing whiskey, and actually the direct fire thing helps us lower our carbon emissions. So because the wash still is wood fire, that means we can run the rest of the distillery on an electric boiler. So it takes the load, you know, the main heating load for a distillery is the wash still. So the rest of it's on an electric boiler. So, you know, we're hopeful we can put in solar panels in the first few years. So that should lower our emissions to something like 95% less than a like-for-like kerosene distillery, which is great.
And also our community and our customers that we want to sell to, these people are educated and intelligent people buying a product like this, and they care about this shit as well. So, you know, even from a business perspective, looking forward, it makes sense to do this as well, I think. Anyway, Jess, as an industry professional, you've had more than enough time to guess precisely what distillery this is.
I was hoping to continue talking about sustainability until two of us have to leave. So I'm
afraid you have to be put on the spot.
I also know you, and I wouldn't be surprised if you were also just like, oh, this is a surprise Armagnac made in Guatemala.
No. This is a single malt Scotch whisky.
Okay, well,
that's a standard distillery expression.
That's good. That narrows it down a bit. I think it's. I was gonna name shame some people then in my impression. I will not name. You can imagine who I'm impersonating. I'll write you some terrible tasting notes. It's really fruity. It definitely. And I don't know if I'm being led here by you telling me that this is an old distillery expression, so my brain's looking for like old kind of dusty fustiness in it where maybe it isn't. It's definitely got some really nice kind of peachy floral notes to it, and it's definitely gentle. It's surprisingly gentle.
So the point of this is not necessarily about the quality of it, although I think it's a nice dram. I think it's a lovely dram, but it's Glenmorangie 10-year-old bottled in the 70s.
Oh, if Joshua was here, he'd be all over this. This is one of his favourites.
But I think this is a great illustration to anyone that thinks that Scotch whisky hasn't massively changed in style as a as a broader product, certainly Scotch malt whiskey. I think you put this next to contemporary Glenmorangie 10 or 12 as it is now, and you get a really perfect illustration of. So this is something I would use more as an educational piece. Going back to what we were talking about earlier, if we're talking to modern whiskey drinkers years from now, pouring them the first bottlings of Kythe, talking about that, something like this, along with its modern day contemporary bottling, would show you immediately what the difference is between old style and modern. Modern Glenmorangie, it's about very good quality wood, but it's not as much about distillate really, whereas this is just knackered refill wood plus really elegant, slightly old school Highland distillate that's got a bit more body to it. It's got some fruit, it's got some waxiness, and I think it's a really good illustrator of that. And from there, I would propose you a dram of something a bit different, which is more about quality and kind of something that inspires us, and something that would be a good indication of, like, if we could make this, we'd be pretty happy.
I think as well.
All right, in the name of science, I'll do it.
I think it comes back to character as well. Again, modern whiskey can be fantastic, and there are some amazing modern bottles of whiskey. I'm not saying there's not, but I think when you're lucky enough to try a whole load of drams distilled in the 50s, 60s, 70s from the sort of the Grand Cru distilleries, Glendronach, Glengrant, Speyburn, Longmorn, any of these phenomenal distilleries, they have character. They're different. They all kind of vary from each other in a way that I think modern whiskies vary less. The sort of the flavour map of modern whiskey, I think, is less diverse than old style. And for me, the kind of ultimate goal for Kythe is to make something that's really recognisable, that has character, that 15, 20, 50 years from now, people doing podcasts or whatever people listen to in 50 years time, be able to pour a dram of Kythe blind and someone goes, oh well, that's clearly Kythe, it's got that character. And I think that's probably the ultimate goal.
I do think in some of my favourite distilleries, in the liquids that you get to try, and I'm not even thinking of, things that come out of people's pockets at festivals or, kind of poured from unlabelled bottles if you go to distilleries. They're like core products that we could walk into any shop and buy, whether it's a supermarket, a specialist retailer. I do think for me, the ones that I like the most have very recognisable characters. So again, what you're talking about with Kythe totally chimes in with what I look for in a whiskey, because I want something that you can riff on that, but that the solid base of what the whiskey is underneath still remains there. So that's all sounding very very much in my lane, and I imagine to a lot of the podcast listeners what you're saying is really just music to their ears too.
Well, I think that's what attracted me to malt whiskey originally, is the following a distillery and seeing from year to year, bottling to bottling, that you've got this variations and changes, but there's always some sort of underlying recognizability. That's that's the sort of bedrock of my passion for the drink, really.
I'm hopeful as well our production will lead to a bit more seasonal variation. So there's a couple of different things, but I think growing our own barley, that's going to be more affected by the weather if we're only taken from one single location. Different yeast, so we're going to be working with local breweries. We might change which breweries we work with year to year. And also, having a longer fermentation, we're thinking we have capacity to do up to 2 weeks as standard. So, if it's a hot year, our fermentations might be a little bit shorter. If it's a cold year, our fermentations might be a little bit longer. So, all these
also
things,
cooling as well.
Yeah, cool, absolutely. All these things I think our production is going to lead to slightly more seasonal variation than standard.
Yeah.
Something we'll lean into rather than try to manage out. I think that with the really interesting alcohols of the world, that it's like a tension between human activity, human decision making, and nature's influence as well. I'm not talking really about terroir here, more just about the specifics of the site and the our decision making role as whiskey makers, when to step in, when to step back. So I
mean, 2 weeks of fermentation I think would make most modern distillery managers scream.
Well, I suppose so, but then the beauty of our project is that we don't have to do 410 litres of alcohol per tonne. We've modelled and assumed that we're going to be around about 310.
Okay.
Which is, that would make, I think that would make most distillery managers at like Diageo sites, I think their head would just explode.
Yeah, extremely anxious. Those are low sounding numbers.
I mean, to put some sort of flesh in the bones for people that haven't studied price of barley and LPA per ton of barley. You know, a standard ton of barley at the moment in Scotland, you'd probably get sort of £500-600 for commercially produced malt. The stuff we're looking at is going to be more like £1,300 a ton. And if you were to process, I don't know what the modern variety everyone's using, like Sassy or something, if you used kind of, you know, Paradigm barley, that's going to be 410 litres of alcohol per tonne of barley processed. And the way we're looking at processing our Maris Otter with brewer's yeast, it's going to be 310 litres of alcohol. So, you know, we're going to pay more than double the amount per tonne, and we're going to make, you know, like 3/4 the amount of alcohol from it. So, you know, I guess what I'm trying to get across is we're making real sacrifices here financially and in terms of efficiency in the plant, but you know, the reason we're doing that is because it's going to taste good, you know, and what's the point in making whiskey if it doesn't taste as good?
Because efficiency is the enemy of character.
Thank you, Angus. Is that
man, I had that on my bingo card for you to say at some point during today.
Free tattoos in the day of Kythe. Angus will tattoo efficiency is the enemy of character onto anybody.
I just came up with that line, and I'm surprised by the amount of people it's wound up. People come up to me at shows and say, this efficiency enemy of character thing, I don't agree with that.
Are they German by chance?
No, there's quite a few people in the industry it's annoyed.
Is that
which
part
I'm
of
quite
the
pleased by. So.
Full 11 years to come up with that? That's where 2 hours to make a distillery.
I don't remember when I came up with it. It just came up when we were writing copy for a business plan, I think is when
we workshopped it with Dominic Cummings. So when Angus does a sort of talk on his lectern, it says efficiency is the enemy of character on the front.
It does sound like it's absolutely right for being a meme.
Could be, yeah. Although I wouldn't thank you for calling me the Dominic Cummings of whiskey.
That was seamlessly done as well.
Possibly
no hesitation.
Yeah, most offensive thing anyone's ever said.
Alistair Campbell then.
Only 1 or 2 steps up. So this is
the podcasters can't see this. Maybe I'll take a picture and send you it. But
absolutely.
It's got a whole series of little words on this that I really enjoy. Starting at the top of the label here, we have a perfect self whiskey, which sounds like that came out of ChatGPT.
Well, it's actually a really ancient bit of lingo for single malt, which is beautiful. I think just
I love all of this.
I
also like this little blue box down here highlighted says most suitable for medicinal purposes. Not for enjoyment, not because you like it. It's only for medicinal purposes. This is a very beautiful, you can tell me it's old, a very beautiful bottle of Glendronach, which is light years away from the last Glendronach that I tried.
Yeah, so this is, I think, a really good indication of the kind of quality, character. There's a lot of things about this whiskey which I think are things that we would call objectives to try and achieve. So it's bottled, it's an official bottling, bottled around the early 1950s, and what's very cool about it, which I didn't realise until I opened it, I bought this specifically to open and take to the whiskey show in London from my old and rare stand, but it's had the ABV thing on it crossed out, and I dipped a hydrometer, and it's actually a foolproof example, so like 56%, so it was probably about 100 proof, 57.1 when it was bottled, and it's just a great example of a really charismatic, fat, heavy, old style Highland malt whiskey. It's non-age statement, so it's probably quite young. It's the fact that it's a really high proof means that it's well preserved, so I think you get really close to proper old style Highland malt whiskey making of that era, so probably 40s distillate. It's, you know, at that high strength, it's very, very thick, really waxy. I get these fantastic like Hessian cedar notes off it, so it's medicinal but without being hugely peaty, just like warming, peppery, thick, just immense characteristics.
I'm amazed for its age how peppery that still is, and it's the light coming through your kitchen doors, you can see the kind of the way it hangs onto the glass once I put it down is yes, it's such a treat. Thanks.
Also, I love about it as well is that there's no obvious like intense wood character about it. No. It feels like a mature malt whiskey, although it obviously has a bit of that power of youth, but it doesn't feel like something that's been put into active wood or where the wood has been kind of managed in it. It just feels like something that's come out of a decent oak cask. And
I'm also guessing though that this whiskey is obviously purposely illustrating your point, which is it comes from an era when I don't imagine distilleries were thinking about casks in half as much detail as they do now. This idea of, you've already said you've talked about your distillery, and we're kind of not producing liquid yet, but you guys have already been out into Spain, and you've got a process and a program in place for casks and seasoning and all that kind of stuff. I can't imagine that Glendronach, in the era that this was distilled and made, really had time to think about going on a trip to Jerez. I think they're probably busy recovering from the war and not thinking too hard about it.
I think so, but I also think that they benefited from a really totally different industry and market for sherry, and a really rich seam of sherry casks just constantly influxing into the UK. A lot of people in the UK, not just old people, as associated now, but a lot of people regularly drank sherry and regularly drank, cream sherry, lovely sort of rich Oloroso driven, slightly sweetened sherry. And you'd get these fantastic old transport sherry casks, American oak transport sherry casks, bringing this liquid into the UK and then, disgorged while still very fresh, being just sent up Scotland or sent over to distilleries to be filled. So I think that and the later absence of that is a big part of what kindled a kind of, and just a general shift in terms of the approach to making and selling, particularly malt whiskey, helped to move attention more towards wood, because wood is something that's controllable and it's rapid. And I think anything that can eat away at some of the sheer relentless length of time it takes to make and put out, good quality whiskey. Understandably, people like the idea of, turning their heads more towards wood than to aspects of production and distillation.
I also think it's a kind of shame the way drinks, I guess, trends and fashions have changed. Every Christmas, our tasting club, we've quite often done, we've picked a distillery and then a load of their releases and put broken them down. So last Christmas we did a Kilhoman, so we had the Kilhoman Madeira cask with some Madeira, we had the PX or the PX cask. It always fascinates me how many people, when we pour these fortified wines that seem a bit mysterious and dusty in the back of your granny's cupboard, when we pour them, people are like, oh shit, this is great. And cream sherry, every time people are like, oh, I thought it was going to be like a Bailey's thing. I think the name's slightly misleading now that we're so far away from being regular consumers of sherry. People are always really surprised when you pour it. They're like, oh, this is really nice. I just need people to make the final leap and start going out and drinking more sherry, so that it's less of a weird conversation to explain.
I think cream sherry as well is quite a it can be quite a broad spectrum product, from extremely sweet to relatively dry, kind of off dry, and it can be young and not very good all the way up to very old, made of outstanding components and a beautiful drink. Cream sherry is what we're using to season our casks for Kythe. With the thinking behind that being just that, well, what were people drinking in the 50s and 60s when all these amazing casks were coming into the country? Predominantly, they'd be drinking cream sherry. And so we sort of worked from that perspective to design our sherry cask supply and program.
So you mean we're not going to be seeing Kythe in tequila casks or?
Yeah, I think last
Johnny's
time
face.
Last time we spoke to someone,
This is a big mistake.
someone mentioned red wine, and I think I went off on one. I am personally not a fan of red wine casks in the use of whiskey maturation, or for that matter, white wine casks.
No, they're atrocious.
Yeah, or tequila or any of that crap. If people like that kind of stuff, good for them. I hope they see the light. I come back to the fact that I want our distillate to shine through. I want it to be recognisably Kythe, not a kind of fun thing to try because it's in a weird, funky Crimean red wine cask or something.
I think there's a place for it in the industry. I think people who are looking for that, I too really struggle with red wine casks. One of my very best friends, who will be listening to this probably as he's on a long walk, is a diehard fan of red wine casks. And sorry Flo, I can't get behind it.
To sort himself out to try
he's always sniffing out somewhere sort of doing a strong red wine cask. So it does nothing for my palate, but I appreciate that we're not all the same and we don't all eat the same food, so why would we all drink the same whiskey? So within an industry, what I love about whiskey is there's a place for people who want heavily sherried, fast finishing, fast matured, sped up almost whiskey, and people that are doing what you're doing, which is kind of the absolute as far away removed from it, the idea of taking everything slowly and just letting the spirit kind of crack on with itself.
I think there's a space for everything in most things in whiskey nowadays, and it's it's a bigger community around the world, it's a bigger culture. Like, obviously there's a broader swathe of tastes and preferences. I suppose ours, as Jonny so eloquently illustrated, are a bit more traditionalist. I mean, I think sherry has been proven to be a beautiful match with Scotch whisky when done well. Just as we want plenty of casks in a warehouse which are just humble refill hoggies and barrels that are going to let our distillate shine, and that's another thing about our plans, is we don't want to be a particularly single cask driven brand or malt. We want to be putting out bottlings which have been a little bit more carefully put together, and a bit of blending, a little bit of activity in the warehouse to kind of manage casks towards the point of showing at their absolute best, and that's going to be all sorts of stuff from playing around with different filling strengths through to different filling levels in the cask, through to aeration, marrying, re-racking carefully into other refills perhaps to help bring different parcels of casks together, create nicely rounded unified character. All these sorts of things we want to put at the heart of our kind of practice around Kythe, and there will undoubtedly be some single casks, but we don't want it to be the kind of the core of what we do. And in time we might look. I mean, I suppose if I was put matches under my fingernails, I would say that I think Sauterne sometimes works quite nicely, but I suspect things like that is like way down our list of priorities to do with Kythe. That we want to do really good sherry. Probably a bit of diversity in terms of the sherry casks we fill, but really good sherry filled as new fillings and given a chance to properly integrate, properly mature. And we want to do refill wood and some first fill bourbon, really.
I think an interesting project for us is going to be to try to bring out the sort of super fruity character that we hope Kythe is going to have at a relatively young age. We don't want to properly release our whiskey till it's 8-10 years old ideally, but we'd like to do a few sort of like test case bottlings along the way. So I think we draw a lot of inspiration from cognac maturation, certainly. Our friends Jean and Amy, who have Jean-Luc Pasquet Distillery in Cognac, fuck me, try their 4-year-old cognac. It is incredible, their organic 4-year-old. So we've talked to them about how they mature that, and as Angus mentioned, things like aeration, trickle dilution over the years. We've got quite a few ideas between us about how we produce something that's maybe 5 years old and just has that like abundant in your face fruitiness. There's a few kind of fun projects that we had in the warehouse in the first few years, I think.
That's another thing as well, is that the big question mark for us is, at what point do we know we're on the right path? Because obviously inherent in this this whole concept is that there's going to need to be a little bit of playing around, a bit of experimentation in the early years, and that's, again, going back to what we said earlier, we've designed a kit and a process to help us do that. We've got lots of receivers, the ability to split different runs and fill them separately, track them separately, so we'll be able to say, right, this thing with fermentation pairs really well with this particular approach we took in mashing, etc. So let's add all that together, and our hope is that within the first couple of years we'll have sufficient evidence in the warehouse and confidence to know that this is the route we want to get into, this is the path we want to really drill into, because we don't really want to do lots of different named makes or anything like that. We just want to do Kythe single malt, and it'd be one distillate that we produce, and as again what Jonny said earlier, a little bit of seasonal variation, a bit of variation through our wood management and the casks we're filling, and hopefully out of that comes really attractive single malt at the end of the day.
And if it's awful, we'll just re-rack it all into red wine.
Oh, that sounds a perfect way to
get rid of it.
If it's awful,
specials.
You'll see the distillery for sale and you'll never hear from us again.
Yeah. No, I think
don't jinx yourselves. I'm confident you do have quite a lot more nous than you're giving yourselves credit for. I like the idea of being able to have the freedom to experiment. At the tasting that I was hosting last night, I was talking to somebody who was telling me about, it's funny you mentioning yeasts, was talking about how he had worked at Canvas as an apprentice, and I hadn't heard anybody mention before, but they were like very experimental with different yeast types. And he was saying that the way that they would experiment with it is they would bake bread. So they had a bakery on site, and the employees used to come home with all these like loaves of bread that they'd made from these insane experimental breads. I mean, like, I have no idea how good your bread's going to be. I'm sure there are plenty of bakers listening who are horrified by that notion. So that could have been a great output for your tea room, but I guess you guys aren't having one. So you just have to be feeding the birds.
Sort of like yeast tasting bag of cookies or something.
Kythe sourdough.
Yeah.
£8.50 a loaf, minimum.
I think at this point we should say, you know, we are, I think one of our greatest strengths since the start of this has been recognising where our weaknesses are, and you know, we have an amazing team that I just couldn't praise highly enough. You know, our sort of lead process engineers, Heart Process, led by a guy called Mike Billington. We have been so lucky to find them. I mean, Mike is just
genius.
He's a genius, and he loves what we're doing, and he's a joy to work with. And our, you know, distilling consultants, sort of lead consultant would be Jack Mayo, who's at Holyrood and Glasgow and various other wee things. But you know, Jack's just a polymath, and similarly, you know, joy to work with. So we're super lucky. You know, we've got Gordon Grant, ex Ardmore, who used to run the direct fire stills up there. Douglas Murray, Diageo, Blythe and Blythe on civils. So really, we have an amazing team, and we're very, very fortunate. So yeah, I mean, Angus and I know the sort of broad brushstrokes we want to achieve, and over the years that's gone more and more and more detailed. But yeah, we've definitely learned on our support network, and we've been very, very fortunate to find the people we have.
And on the flip side of that as well, the other thing about Kythe, which I think is really special and potentially even unique, is that all our shareholders are essentially just whiskey nerds. And yeah, some of them have got much deeper pockets than us, but no one is a shark in it just for pure investment, you know, sort of venture capital terms. It's all people that have put in, you know, meaningful, helpful amounts of money because they believe in the project and they want to see it succeed. And they've taken a look at our very detailed 16-year business plan and been like, yep, I want on board with this. And they're all people that, you know, love old style Scotch whisky and kind of want to see a project like this, you know, flourish and do well. And that gives me such like motivation and passion for what we're doing, and kind of a good bolster of confidence as well. I am confident that, you know, we'll be able to do something special. And I think, as Jonny rightly says, we know, like, it's been a very humbling process. You know, I used to think I knew about whiskey, and then started trying to do a distillery and realise how fucking little I know about it, all this stuff, really. And a lot of the people that really, truly know Scotch whisky and understand it, and are kind of nuts and bolts right down into the marrow, are people that you've not really heard of, kind of just, you know, the engineers and the scientists and the people that kind of in the background a bit in the industry. And we're really lucky that we've got a really broad spectrum team with a lot of different types of experience, really deep experience, and I think that is going to only be more and more of an asset over the years ahead.
Yeah, and it feels like you guys have started since I first heard and you announced the project. I feel like we're kind of speeding towards stuff, but listening to you talk, there's obviously so much more to come, and so much more learning and experimentation, and hopefully lots of successes for you guys. I want to do a Jason style roundup to this interview, although Angus has kind of done a bit, so I'm going to make Jonny go first. Jason always likes to round out our interviews by asking, what is it that has you most excited about maybe not the industry at large, what's to come, and that'll give Angus long enough to think of something they didn't just say.
For Scotch whisky, if you like.
Yeah, for the industry that you're about to kind of eventually burst onto the scene of with liquid, what is it that you're looking forward about adding into that? I don't want to lead you.
I think we're part of I hesitate to use the word movement. Dominic Cummings over there might use it, but
secondary industry.
Well, I like the fact that, yeah, as Angus says, secondary industry, but our peers, you know, people who have built distilleries and started or are building. But you know, I see a lot of our contemporaries are as excited about, you know, the sort of fermentation side as we are. So, you know, Dunfale's an obvious example. They've, you know, already started. Dornoch, you know, what they've done at sort of Dornoch 1 and will do at their new distillery is going to be phenomenal as well. People at North Uist, I'm not sure to pronounce the one that Ewan's just gone to. Is it Cabrach?
Yeah, Cabrach.
Cabrach and Speyside. Rathsay. So many of these guys are doing interesting things, and I'm undoubtedly missed the people out of Holyrood, for instance, as well. And I don't see that as a threat at all. If anything, I see that's going to help us. It's lots of relatively small independent people coming out with the same message, talking about, hey, look, it's not all about wood, it's about fermentation. Of course, everyone's doing it from a slightly different angle, and I think Kythe are coming at it from a different angle again. But it's part of this sort of bubbling up of nerdy interest into spirit, and I think that's going to be really, really exciting in 5-10 years' time.
Yeah, I mean, I think we live in we're on the cusp of a bit of a golden age for Scotch whisky. We've been through all sorts of stuff over the years, and been through an era where quality was pretty beige and shit for a long time. Been through a period of massive expansion and sudden retraction, and there's lots of critical commentary about the number of distilleries that are starting up, and I don't doubt for a minute it's going to be hard for a lot of people, and there probably will be a fair number that won't succeed. But I think that there's plenty out there that you can already see who are succeeding and will succeed because they are independent and they're run by real people with genuine interest in quality and interesting ideas, and it's quite a supportive industry. And I think it's also mirrored a little bit by the world of indie bottling. Like, Scotland's in a bit of a boom for, I think, like yourselves. I hope Decadent Drinks is part of it as well. Thompson Brothers, North Star, all these, What Whisky, all these guys are, modern, newish, interesting Scottish companies run by genuine, sort of truthful, funny, awesome people. I'm really proud that, we're in the mix with all that and part of it, and that, Kythe is going to be part of that in the future. And, it feels, it doesn't feel threatening. It feels like really exciting and something, an awesome, wider kind of cultural phenomenon to be part of.
Yeah, I think that's kind of how I feel about being in the industry right now. It feels like we are moving in a direction which is exciting and something new. Just can't define what it is yet.
Well, I've used the phrase like secondary industry, which doesn't really sound, it sounds a bit naff, but I think it's kind of true. You've got the big guys doing what the big guys do, and I kind of think of that machine as this thing designed to mass market shift blended Scotch whisky, out of which rather incidentally sometimes get spat some really good malts and produce some really good malts. I'm probably too harsh on them sometimes, really, but there's that blob that sits there, and sort of flourishing all around it is these much smaller indie, kooky, but still, pretty serious, pretty awesome little companies, indie bottlers and distilleries, and which is a response to this sort of burst of enthusiasm for Scotch whisky around the world. And I think those are the ones that are in a stronger position to succeed and flourish in the years ahead, because, the future for Scotch whisky at the sort of really serious 1 million cases a year scale looks pretty tough and challenging in the decades ahead. But I think that there is absolutely a community and a culture and customers around the world in sufficient volume to support and sustain smaller, more quality focused operations like us.
So essentially, we want to make whiskey great again. We could get that on some red baseball caps and.
I was going to say drink.
No tea towels, but we do have baseball caps.
I'm not a baseball cap kind of. Okay, well, we can workshop the merch at the end of this.
Make Angus great again.
That's also a slightly Scottish tourist board.
It brings a refreshing change to MAGA.
Yeah.
Oh gosh, no, quick, we're losing the podcast listeners. I'm going to wrap it up here. Thank you very much for telling me about Kythe. I look forward to coming back on an unofficial visit.
We won't tell anyone
Not in Deepest Darkest 5. We will leave it there, but thank you very much. And thank you for these drams. Podcast listeners, you have no idea what you're missing out on.
Thank you very much for having us. You're more than welcome.
Thanks so much, guys.
Well, Jess, thanks to you, thanks to Jonny, thanks to Angus for that conversation. That was brilliant to listen to hear.
Cheers.
you know, what they've got planned. And when they mentioned that old Glenmorangie and sort of targeting, you're just sort of highlighting how whiskey used to be made versus how whiskey is now currently made. I don't know. I was just drooling listening to you guys talk about that old.
Yeah,
that
I was
Glenmo.
when he pulled that out, I was definitely thinking of you, and knowing what a soft spot you have for that kind of old style Glenmorangie. I also was a bit anxious because it was I think he had it in a tube for something else. And Angus is well known for being a bit of a trickster, and I was trying to look at Jonny's eye, see if he knew there was some sort of mischief happening here. But yeah, that was delicious, but the obvious runaway winner, I think you can hear me talking about it, is the Glendronach from the 50s. Was ridiculous.
Yeah, classic Joshua to go with the Glenmo approach. Nothing but respect there. But yeah, those
PCT.
old sherry 50s, it's just so historically rich.
Yeah.
As well as being delicious. So, yeah, the little green-eyed monster came out there, Jess. That was a nice little treat that you got to enjoy.
I went all the way to the
I
kingdom.
celebrate.
The very
that.
deepest, darkest kingdom of Fife. I needed some sort of
That's a big
sustenance.
ask.
Sure.
Come here.
Sure.
Yeah, that's a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you were talking, or they were talking about the mash tun being installed.
Yeah, so actually since we recorded, which is a couple of weeks back, they've put pictures up. They've got, they're starting to build a little bit more. We talked a bit about social media. Jonny's put up, I think, a little bit of a write-up. Well, I suspect it's Angus and Jonny have put up photographs of the mash tun being in and being kind of commissioned, put in place. So go check out the old social medias, and you can kind of watch it sort of building up slowly in real time. There's some good pictures of the inside of this mash tun, and a nice picture of Aaron and Jonny as well, having a little look up at full sight for it too. So yeah, it's really real, I think, and that was something that I felt like the guys were really excited about, having sort of talked about it and planned it for so long. That's the idea that it's now real and happening. It's pretty cool. So that'll keep them busy, I think, until we've got some sort of more fun pictures of like liquids and things, the real plant being commissioned towards the end of the year. So yeah, good luck to them.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say. Best of luck. What an endeavour to get involved in as a couple of guys that we have known for a good while now. Gosh, probably around about a decade on that front. So yeah, best of luck to them in their old style whiskey.
Good luck and Godspeed. So Jess and Jason, when we started this conversation at the very beginning, at the top of the episode, we sort of hinted at the fact that Jess will have some pretty large global releases news, but we here in the United States of America have some of our own news to share. So much news between Jason, Jess, and Joshua, and Single Cask Nation globally speaking, that I think, and I hope you'll agree, this warrants we bring the paperboy out from his closet.
Do it.
Do it.
Extra, extra! Read all about it! Life story of Playboy Penny! Extra, extra! Extra, extra! Read all about it! Me and that Playboy in trouble again!
Jason, can I hand the mic over to you so you can share the big news of the day?
Get on the mic! Get on the mic! Just get on the mic! Get on the mic, Mike!
Yeah. So actually, my news is twofold, and then I will give the Padcost floor over to Jessica Rabbit Lomas. So to tie up a little bit of our summer, I was in DC the other day. I was at Jack Rose Dining Saloon, which is always an honour and a treat, and I opened my tasting by saying, if you have a chance to come to DC and listen to a Scotsman celebrate Bourbon Heritage Month while pouring rye whiskey, you should absolutely do it. And we had the best group of people in the room, and not to throw Joshua, had an incomplete list at you,
right. But
I have to celebrate long-time listeners of the podcast, where we've seen them in Seattle together. I've seen them in San Francisco, and I just saw them in DC. Philippe Panavong and his now wife Zipporah were in attendance. They were in Maryland getting married the Saturday before my Monday tasting.
Amazing.
And they showed up without me knowing a single thing about it. And it was brilliant, absolutely brilliant to spend time with them. Also had Great Nation members who were back in our February historical tasting with us. Brian and Amy were there. Alex was there. Alex knows who he is. I don't need to give any more details there. And Brad was there. And Brad is a deep into the podcast as well. So big shout out to Brad for being in the room as well. It was great group, great tasting. The reason I bring it up in the news segment is June 6th was our big American launch. Still have 3 bottlings sitting on the website there: Wilderness Trail, Catoctin Creek, and Black Button. And those were the first 3 bottlings that I poured at the tasting. And I made a point, and you and I have mentioned this previously in another episode, Joshua, maybe even the last episode with Pat Heist. When we made the selection of the Wilderness Trail, we really sat with it, and it really blossomed in the glass.
Oh, yeah.
And you sometimes lose that. Jess is talking today about being at a festival, right? When you're at a festival or in a tasting, even in a masterclass, you move through pourings very quickly. And when you have an opportunity to sit and return, some casks really blossom. And so we really focused on that at the Jack Rose tasting and went back and forth between Wilderness Trail and Catoctin Creek and Black Button and saw the way they evolved and changed, and it was magnificent.
That's awesome.
Really magnificent. So had a blast, absolute blast. Great group of people, great pours. Bill Thomas was very complimentary at the end, and very complimentary of our nation members as well.
Hey,
so way to represent the nation, my good friends in attendance. We also have our launch from the end of September, where we return to Scotch. And we've got our Ben Nevis, our Aberfeldy, our Thrusk, and our Williamson, which is our unnamed South Shore Isla distillery that is neither Ardbeg nor Lagavulin.
That just
and maybe you'll love it, maybe you'll hate it. You know, who knows? Who knows? Who knows? I'm just asking questions.
Oig. That's what my Uncle Morty would say. He would laugh and then he'd say "oig." You know, just
oig.
Yeah, oig.
We can go into oig. I'm just asking questions like Elon Musk.
Yeah, yep.
That's classic. So yeah, those are beginning to ship. By the time this drops, they will be well into being shipped. My guess is we will have completed the shipments for those who were there on launch day. And now, with this episode dropping in October, we are getting our October ducks in a row.
Quack, quack.
For another round of casks. But that will remain. Keep an eye on singlecasknation.com. Make sure you're signed up. Make sure you're on the email list. And we will let you know what the future holds. But I wish to give the floor to our dear Jessica Rabbit Lomas and global launch.
Ooh, I feel like Joshua needs a special drum roll sort of noise for this section.
Isn't that what you're not hearing that? Let me turn it up just now.
Lovely, yeah. That was much better. It was just not. It was too subtle. That was the problem.
That's what it was. Okay.
Yeah. So, I guess it's time to talk about some whiskies that are not going stateside. And there's in the distance, just there, I can already hear the furious typing from several of our regular correspondents who are stateside based, who get really excited when I say things like that. Yes, so we have a whole. I was trying to think of a nice plural apart from like a whole bundle of casks. Can you have a bundle of casks? Bundle makes me feel like you should be able to rake.
How about a plethora?
Plethora.
A gaggle.
Oh, a gaggle. Let's do a gaggle. Yep.
Is that not geese, though? I don't.
Yes.
A murder.
pack.
It's a murder.
It's a murder.
Oh, a murder of casks.
Yeah, murder of casks. There you go.
So that fits the drum roll that we just heard.
That's true.
Yeah.
Somewhat
From
more
now on,
sinister.
we're only releasing our casks in murders. I love it.
I tell you, if we created a murder podcast, we'd really increase our listenership.
Love me. My favorite genre after listening to this podcast, obviously because it's my source of news, and I found out what you two are actually doing. I listen to a lot of crime podcasts. So yeah, if we could combine whiskey and crime,
Oh, man.
in a responsible way, obviously.
If we could get hashtag a murder of casks into the show description, the episode description, this is a game changer. We're going big time.
Okay,
Ask
we're going
and you
viral.
shall receive. All right, Jess. go ahead. Let's go down the list, because as you go down the list too, I want to think of maybe a cask or two that we can put some liquid in glass and talk about.
A pour would be ideal.
Yeah. I'm getting thirsty.
Little parched.
Yeah, I'm definitely getting thirsty. It's nice that we're discussing things, but I've got some glasses in front of me. I've got some bottles that I can crack in front of me. Okay, so you want a little Joshua Hatton incomplete list, and then we're gonna do some little stop-offs and drink things. Okay, so in no particular order, I think, because I feel like that's how this is going to work. So we've definitely got a Glengarry 21-year-old in first fill bourbon hogshead. Yum yum.
It's funny that you're not an up-talker, and yet you just said Glengarry with a question mark at the end.
So it's a bit of
Is it a
mystery.
Glengarry?
Could be a Glengarry, could be a Glengarrioch.
Oh,
Easy, Jess. Easy.
Look, I know
moving on.
much
Calling
better than
whiskey HR.
that. Don't worry, I'm fully self-policing on that. So we've got Glengarry. We also have an Aberfeldy, which is in second fill bourbon. Which again, like, so those first two kind of unusual. We don't see a whole heap of those as nice individually released single casks. I just forgot the word single cask. That's great, as I'm looking at a bottle with Single Cask Nation written on it. Bringing a little kind of fun, a little journey, because obviously we're at the end of the year, and when I pour for people and say, what is it you want to drink, they all say, Jess, stop with the exciting casks. All we want is fifth fill, very slow maturation. No. We've got a Bunnahabhain Stosha. So here we've got our first bit of Isla happening, and that's in refill PX hogsheads. So bit of sherry, bit of smoke, bit of leave this in the market so I can go buy some. Thank you very much. I've already informed my family they're not getting any Christmas presents. I've already mentally spent all of the whiskey money. I've got Balmenic. So this, I feel like a distillery Jason has started mentioning literally all of the time.
Thank you, Jess. Thank you. I feel seen. Thank you.
I don't know when you were here. I feel like we drank quite a lot of it in Glasgow. You were really vibing Balmenic, which is a tribe I have yet to see assigned in the whiskey world. So perhaps you could start that. It's a little 11-year-old.
Yeah. Can I tell you what kicked it off for me? I may have mentioned it during 2024 or not, but when we were all in Edinburgh, in Glasgow, in Scotland in January, and Scottish Malt Whisky Society had just put out their warm, reeking rich, and just delicious, delightful, and I kept reaching for that at the venues. That put Balmenic front and centre on my mind to look for. And now, anybody who's come over to visit me, the first thing I have poured for them is that Balmenic. And so, yeah, I'm on a kick of my own. Like, listen, you meet nation members, they're talking about Dalyuen freely. They're talking about Inchgower freely. We got to keep that train moving along the tracks. The current Athrusk that I just mentioned on the website is an old school style of whiskey. I want people to be mentioning Athrusk. Balmenic I really want as well. And there's going to be one in 25 that we're going to be mentioning a whole lot more as I take a cheeky look at your list to see if you're about to say it, and I don't think you are.
Look at this guy, honestly.
And it's a worm tub
spoilers left, right,
distillery,
and
by the
centre.
Balmenic
That's
worm
right.
tubs.
Balmenic is a worm tub. Yep.
But you've got to stop invoking worm tubs. People are like visibly angry now if you bring it up in front of them.
I know. Yeah.
Harsh. Okay,
Give me a second. I need to grab my shoes from the door. It just started bucketing down. But please continue. Just if you hear my chair, dear listener, that's what I'm doing.
I thought that was a real euphemism there. I thought, just getting my shoes from the door. Yeah, sure you are, Jason. Wink. What should we have next? Oh, are you thirsty? I'm thirsty. Let's have our first stop at a thing to drink.
Okay. What are we drinking?
A glass. So the next, and I feel like we can have a little chat about it for a while. I've got a bottle here which is called Black Spoke Bridge.
Black Spoke Bridge.
Ooh, listeners of the podcast, what does that mean? And this is what I was calling a fresh crack, which is going to fail me massively because our beautiful bottles, which I adore, you have to fill in your own sound effect. That's the best I can do. Okay.
Let me see if I can record some audio here. That didn't work. Yeah, so
You want me to go back and get my shoes again?
Thanks very much.
So Black Spoke Bridge. So this is. I'm trying to think how many distilleries you mentioned so far. You mentioned the Aberfeldy. You mentioned the Balmenic.
Yep.
Now we're talking the Black Spoke Bridge.
Yeah, and we've had a Glengarry and we've had a Stosha.
Oh, Glengarry and the Stosha.
And what's the cask on this?
It is
Full details.
First fill spit oak. So for those of you who are unaware with abbreviations, what they mean, that's spit oak is a Spanish oak. Oloroso, hogshead, brackets, 5 years, because we are not messing around with finishes here. Thank you very much. And it's a June 2011 distillation. I nearly said distribution. And we've bottled it as a 13-year-old as a nice and chunky 58.4%.
And the
That's
cask,
a good age on that.
Cask ID number?
Cask ID number, for those who are writing this down on your bingo sheet, 152770. Can you taste that? Oh yes, I had that on my sheet.
Look at the color on this liquid. It's just so rich, so dark.
I am shouting at you from myself in the future as I'm driving the car, listening to you say, look at the colour on this whiskey.
But let's talk about the color we've assigned to it. Jason,
yes,
do you remember?
Good save.
Do you remember the color we assigned to it, Jess or Jason?
Color assigned. Let's jump in with 2 feet.
Oh.
Burnt ochre.
Nice. That fits.
Right?
It absolutely fits. There's no doubt about that.
So this is not my favourite. I wonder if we're going to get to a Johnston Yelling colour, which is my favourite, which is a burnished copper. That's not what this is. I think this is really fun. I'm going to have a little nose, and maybe you two could explain to the dear listeners what on earth Black Spoke Bridge is all about.
Yeah. So one of the things to our mind is if you're unable to use a distillery name, and obviously we're always looking to use a distillery name when able, but when unable, we go on the old Google Maps or the Apple Maps. Your mileage may vary. You may pull out an AA road map of the United Kingdom, which we had in our car growing up.
I am an ordnance survey map
trips.
or death. That's your ordnance survey, or you get lost. I can't. No other maps acceptable.
And so perfect. So you call up the distillery that shall not be named, and you start looking for obvious landmarks roundabout, so that when people put it in the Google machine, they go, Stones of Stenness is a very popular unnamed distillery in single cask nation circles. See what I did there? And if you go to the Google machine and put in Stones of Stenness, you will see a standing stone circle between 2 distilleries, Scapa and Highland Park. And we have famously said it is not Scapa. And so when you then look up Black Spoke Bridge, it is somewhat equidistant between Cragganmore and Glenfarclas.
Oh.
and one of them is more litigious than the other. And I'm not going to say which one this is.
Chicken.
But what's nice about this bridge is it crosses the River Spey, right? So it really puts a little sense of place there for people. So I think once you nose it, and once you, of course, taste it, you realize, okay, it's not the other one, it's the other one.
It's not the other one.
100%.
It's the other one. Yeah, very good, very good.
All right, so I mean, off the bat for me, it's just like crushed nuts. Go easy, Jason. Like like toffee and Brazil nuts, and just like all of the dark things, melted milk chocolate going on in there.
It's a bit of I would call it a lip smacker.
Oh, right. Oh, you're onto the taste already. I haven't even.
Yeah, you guys were talking for ages. I got thirsty.
All right. Okay, here we go.
We spent 10 minutes on burnt ochre.
Yeah, but it's also I got anxious at the idea of litigation, so I just thought I'd...
Yeah, also very correct. Correct.
There's also a really fruity note going on here, like almost like a overripe peach kind of note on the nose, which I kind of like. Like, take that peach and soak it in some rum, and now we're talking.
Well, I want to throw in one for our friends in the UK, and I don't know how far travelled this note is, but cola cubes. And I would imagine we've got European friends, international friends who come to Scotland and make sure they buy a poke of cola cubes. And I get that on the nose, and I absolutely love that note. Cola cubes, Jess?
I like it in whiskey. I like them in whiskey, but I really don't like them as a sweet. Don't really know why. I'm not really into cola flavored anything. Like when you have a Haribo, the cola bottles were always the one I would trade my brother for fried eggs, because they're clearly the superior option.
Interesting.
But I don't really know why. It definitely it's in the nose here, but I enjoy it in the form of whiskey. So there's no issues with that here. Definitely, I think it's really it's my first whiskey of the day, listeners of the podcast. And sometimes people find that hard to believe that I wait until late into the afternoon before I lay into the drams. But it's really making my mouth water. It's really like rich, and it's kind of hanging onto your teeth. I often talk about grippy whiskey. It's really set in the way that you would do if you have a treacle sponge, or a bit like do you have in America like Jamaica cake? Do you know what I mean, Jason? The ones that my mum would give us. There's
I love Jamaica cake.
There's a treacle sponge one.
Like a heavy golden...
and a golden syrup
heavy golden syrup sponge.
Yeah.
Although denser than a sponge. It's kind of on its way towards malt loaf kind of consistency.
I like this.
Yeah, really.
It's cracking.
Okay, I'm going to get you some for when you next come over, because it's magical. And if you slice it on the pretense that you're only going to have one little bit, and warm it up and put some... and it has to be no other things accepted. It has to be bird's eye custard or ambrosia from a can. Always from a can. Yeah. Never from a. You can get them at plastic tubs now, which I think is cheating. But when I was younger, it was custard in a can, and so like this is very.
I knew you were going custard on that one.
Childhood.
It's the only thing to accompany it with.
And what we used to fight over, it's this little tiny loaf cake that's kind of, I don't know, like not much longer than your hand, and it's in a paper wrapper, the same way as when you would bake at home. But all the kind of like squidgy bits from the wrapper stay on the wrapper. So when you sliced it, even if you were only allowed one stupid slice, you were permitted to scrape all the sticky bits off the edge.
Yes.
That didn't count as having another slice. So me and my brother would be there with the knife kind of peeling away all we could before we were told to put it back in the tin. You've had your one slice.
And then sometimes the paper would rip, and then you'd be stuck. Like you've got the squidgy bit, but it's also got a bit of paper on it. Guess what? You eat the paper.
It's coming with you. No.
Fiber,
but honestly,
fiber in your diet.
Yeah, it's probably got more nutritional value than the rest of the cake. But if my mum could hear this, because she doesn't know what a podcast is, unbelievably, she would be very annoyed that I'm making it sound like we had a really abusive childhood. We weren't. She was just very strict about cake. So yeah, I've got a lot of that happening here. This is lovely, and it lasts. So all this time that we've been wittering about Jamaican cake, I've still got a bit of that kind of warming, chewy sherryness happening in here, which is definitely the cask at work. But I think it's lovely. It's got a little bit of kind of saltiness at the end. There's just a little zing to stop it being too sweet, I think.
See, I'm focused on the fruitcake bit. Like, that was a guilty pleasure as a young Jewish boy growing up, having a Christmas fruitcake. You sneak it under the Hanukkah bush, and you give it a wee taste. It's just such a rich whiskey.
It's so cute, because the bit in my household, when somebody brought around, like when your auntie or your granny had made like fruitcake, as kids, it was a fruitcake we would hand back to my mum, but we would have peeled the marzipan and the icing and eaten that bit. The cake, it's only as I've got older that I've discovered the magic of good fruitcake. It was always the marzipan and the icing for us.
Love it.
You need to discover the magic of bad fruitcake, Jess.
No, I don't.
Awesome.
Okay. I think that's really what put me off to start with. I like dry with horrible fruit in it that's not soaked long enough. Yeah. But I feel like fruitcake is a very British, and then people who have been to the UK tasting note. In the same way that when we get towards that time of the year, we start talking about things like mince pies. I did a tasting last year with a whole bunch of friends that we do every year. We send out, we do like a deconstruction of a distillery, and we'll look at all their different cask types. So we did Kilhoman last year, and we did PX, we had a Fino, some Madeira. So we were basically trying the bottles of that distillery and then trying it alongside a PX wine, trying it with some Madeira, trying it with, and when it's Christmas, I always do like a kind of suggested shopping list to go with the drams, but always with a note of feel free to riff on it and do as you like. But I think for this distillery, a little mince pie here would be delicious. But I hadn't really thought about the fact that we had an incredibly international audience, and so we were discussing mince pies, and my lovely Finnish friend was like, "This sounds disgusting. Why are you putting cream on a meat pie?" And it was only at that point I was like, "Oh yeah, mincemeat is not always finely minced animal product. It's also this slightly weird syrupy fruit mixed with suet, and then you put it in a pie." You're right, that is weird. Now I've said it out loud. So, but all those kind of, to me, very Christmassy, very, I said the word, oh no, very seasonal spicy is type thing. This dram is going to be absolutely perfect for that.
Yep.
Mince pie, 100%. Brackets, non-mince pie, close brackets.
All right. So what else do we have? What else is going on?
Okay, what else is on my list?
Global release.
So we've also got and I'm excited because it's a long-time favourite of mine. I've got a Glenmurray 10-year-old, which is also in second fill PX Hogsheads, which is going to be a smashing little number. I think it's going to be a real winner, that.
Have we done a global Glenmurray before, or is this our first?
No, it's global first global Glenmurray. That's quite hard to say. First global Glenmurray. Blah, 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 blah. So that's really exciting because I am a big fan.
That is.
And it's delicious. I'm just going to switch around my things under here. What else have we got? We have got... okay, we're going to go with this one next. So I'm going to go for our next tasting whiskey. So excuse the clanking, dear listeners of the podcast. Whilst I try not to drop whiskey all over the table.
I know which sample bottle I'm opening.
Next up, for our next fresh crack, we have got a whiskey that I'm going to be honest, listeners, I have rarely heard these two be so excited about a whiskey. Like,
I know where we're going.
When you're a kid in the supermarket and you really want some sweets or something, and the whole way around the shop here to your mum, I'm so hungry. Do you know a little, just a little something? Why do we? Can I have a little? The whole way around, like chitter chatter. When we started talking about the lineup for this outturn, these two were that exact small child. Like, we could have wouldn't that be? So this dram I'm about to announce is a Tobermory, and it's a 16-year-old, and it has been in a refill French oak barrique for 3 years. It's a 2008 distillate, and it's 55.7%. And I'm going to start with the 3 words. So on our nice new labels, we have 3 words or a truncated tasting note that we put over the top by our flavometer. Let me tell you, the Germans think that word is hilarious. So our 3 words here, our what 3 words are coastal, grassy, and rewarding. And I'm gonna while I do this little fresh crack, which but I'll do a pour. You can have a glug while I pour it in a glass,
But
right?
go ahead. Oh, look at the sound of that. And so, just to be clear for our listeners, you mentioned Tobermory.
Yeah, I did.
Now, usually, and when I say usually, I mean the only time we've ever bottled Tobermory is when it's been peated, and therefore we call it Lichig. Are we calling this one Lichig?
We are not.
Believe so.
Not. Unpeated Tobermory. So it's Tobermory.
This is the other side of the distillery.
The unpeated one.
Oh, man.
Yeah, and if you don't have the distillation date in front of you, Jess, this is 2 days before my 2008 birthday and 4 days before yours.
Oh, that's nice.
So for the listeners, this is the 25th of June, 2008.
Where were you on the 25th of June, 2008?
Recovering from the 27th of June, 2004.
Ah, okay.
I was in Washington, D.C. with Delma and Mimi in Haida's belly, uterus to be exact, enjoying the sights.
Hashtag woke.
Well, this turned into a discussion I was not anticipating. I was just going to say that I was in Aberdeen drinking whiskey in mine and Jason's former alma mater. But okay, yeah, sure.
There you go.
Love a
Look at that.
fetus update. Is that our first one of the podcast? I think so. Okay, so what colour on the old
Yes.
Dulux
The
Watcheroo?
formal colour on this is tremendous.
This is a good one. I feel like the listeners are going to enjoy this as they're in their cars.
Strap in.
Paging HR.
I said in.
The colour on this, I think we should start putting these on the label so people can enjoy my frustration at our naming conventions for colours of whiskey. Dear listener, we have gone for yellow topaz.
That's perfect.
Isn't that so great? Isn't that the best color descriptor ever
I feel like
assigned to a whiskey?
The jewelers who are also listeners to the podcast are going to be delighted. We've really been neglecting them as a category of listener.
And they're like, they could have mentioned citrine, but they went with yellow topaz. Bless them.
I think that's because topaz is nicer than citrine, but...
all right.
Topaz is green? What did you just say?
No, I think it's nicer than citrine as a gemstone.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay. I'm so far out my depth. I have literally nothing to offer.
All right.
But the nose on this
luckily
is beguiling.
Beguiling? Why is that not one of the 3 words?
Because we use that word in another one. but I remember when we first wrote the notes on this, and Jess, when you were going to mention, X number of words, I thought you were going to go with what our official tasting notes say, which starts off with breakfast in a glass. Right?
That's a strong start. There's also I feel like you two were having far too much fun when you came up with these notes. Like, this is sometimes when I read back our tasting notes, I can see the ones that I have had more of an influence in, and I can see the ones where one or both of you is really just taking it and run with it. So you've mentioned the nose on here begins with breakfast in a glass, but I'm going to skip ahead, even though I haven't sipped it yet. And we've got for the palate here, you two have written redolent of the coast with wet sand dunes.
But you got to keep going.
You want more of it?
Coast.
Okay, wet sand dunes, marram grass, and a hint of salt in the air. But note 2, freshly soaked barley, dry hay, yellow rhubarb, and a gentle vanilla sponge sweetness.
Yeah, for the listeners, like sometimes you'll have it where a whiskey just puts you in a moment. Mm-hmm. And for me, on tasting this, it put me not on the beach at Ayr, but it put me on the patch between the car park and the beach, where it's a bit sandy underfoot. It's clearly been raining because it's Ayr on the Ayrshire coast. And you've got that wet sand, but then you've got that very dry, very rigid grass.
That hurts
that is
when you're walking
giving
it.
you an experience. Right? You're kind of walking around it, in between it. And I thought the grass was so present. And then you're at the coast, so there's a bit of salt in the air. Tasting this was that exact moment in time. And I haven't done that in a few years, but it always takes you back to being a kid, doing that as a kid and just hoping the sun would come through all the cloud cover, and it never did.
I've never had such a delightful Ayrshire Coast beach experience that would. I would venture to say this is far more pleasant than an Ayrshire Coast beach experience, but I don't want the entire West Coast coming for me.
Yeah, I'm saying nothing about Yorkshire right now in retaliation. I'm taking the high ground, Jess.
Okay, well, you do that. Shall I, just as a final flourish of the flamboyancy of your writing here, for our finish, it is really long actually as I'm talking, but long with lingering saltiness, barley sugar, and, wait for it, a beguiling minerality.
There you go.
There's your beguiling.
There you go. It's in there.
Oh, guys.
But here's the serious part of that. Do you get that minerality in the finish?
Yeah, I do. And definitely that kind of lingering saltiness is there. And I definitely agree with the rhubarb in the palate. That's kind of like, it switches for me between that kind of like maltiness, but also that like tartness of rhubarb.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
It's so funny.
Tartness, right? Yeah.
I really want it to make me feel like I'm on Mull. When the weekend I went to Mull was extremely wet, like awful wet. Everybody was just wet and grumpy the whole time. So maybe that was a bit too wet for it to feel like this. But maybe I should take the bottle back, go back to Mull, and have a little plodder on Tobermory with it.
Yep.
Yeah, just a gentle myrrh in the air will maybe capture this whiskey for you. Not with a Y.
Not Murray.
And not... The less said about my brother on Mull, the better. Although, hey, look, I'm showing this to the camera again. Yeah. I am showing the Lechig Glencairn that my brother and his wife brought me from their trip to the Tobermory distillery.
Perfect.
Two non-whiskey drinkers went to Mull and got some whiskey shit.
See when your brother and his wife tell you, "Oh, we're at Tobermory, we got you a wee something." Like, oh, rubbing hands with glee. Oh, I wonder what they selected for me. I know they've got a handful in the distillery. Oh, I wonder what it is. Don't tell me what it is. I'll see it when I see you. Branded Glencairn glass and a coaster is very kind. Never look a gift horse in the mouth, they say. Yeah. Never. Gosh. You can't drink it. You can only drink from it.
That was getting quickly into the dangerous territory of ungracious little shit. That's where, when you were like, I got anxious for a minute there. I'll take another
sitting
sip.
Right next to me at my desk. I look at my glass every day and I think of my brother and his wife not buying me whiskey at the Tobermory distillery.
Full marks to you, Murray. Well done.
Oh, brilliant. I'm so glad we poured this one. It's so nice to have it back in the glass.
It's a real contrast to our Black Spoke Bridge, to kind of go between the
Very
two.
much so. Mm-hmm.
It's fun.
Yep.
So,
did we say that? And I'm sorry, I was so excited about sampling this again. Did we mention the Tobermory cask?
We did.
Oh,
but I
and
shall
the cask
repeat.
ID, and there's people, inquiring minds want to know.
Inquiring minds, please write with a stamped address envelope. So we had that it was a refill French oak barrique for 3 years. We did not have cask ID for those people who are collecting the old numbers game. It's 192450. So now you can fully enjoy that dram knowing that number exists in your mind.
You could taste each number.
Yeah.
It's delicious.
Difference maker.
Absolutely.
That's just cracking. That's, we always get into that position where they're all your children and you don't want to pick a favourite and you don't want to make any of them feel bad about themselves.
Yada, yada, yada.
The Tobermory for me is just wow.
Yeah.
Like I keep returning, and I've said this in tastings, I've said it on the podcast, is when we go from selecting to bottling and having access to our own bottles, purchasing on the open market like everybody else, I judge a whiskey by how often have I gone back to that sample. This Tobermory is the one that I've been the other day. Like, I should pour some of that Tobermory. I should pour some of that Tobermory. Just phenomenal, really phenomenal. And I say that as somebody on the other side of that distillery. Lechig.
Yeah.
Listeners know that about me. Tobermory, boom. Our first unpeated Tobermory for the nation. And Jess gets it for global markets.
Bam. All right. Yeah.
Well, I already have I have two uncles that love whiskey, and I have one who lives up here in Scotland, and he is a massive Tobermory fan. So maybe this is his Christmas present sorted. Even though I just told all of the Padcast listeners, none of my family are getting Christmas presents. Do you think he'd mind if I sent him a bottle of it with just like a generous dram for me taken out of it?
You know what I would do?
He wouldn't know, right?
I would get him...
Not in the slightest.
I would get him a Tobermory glass. That's what I would do.
Oh,
that's a good idea.
Right?
They're crowd pleasers. I'm just looking at it again. Sorry, I couldn't
resist.
I could not look at
help
it.
yourself. All right. So listen. We've got what? 2 more whiskeys
One more.
within the one more. Are we going to pour this one more?
Yes, we are. For reasons that are about to become extremely apparent. So hang on. I'm going back to the old desk shuffle, listeners.
Shuffle noise.
I'm gonna have to ask Santa if there's money in the budget for me to have an entire sound recording studio, and I wouldn't have to do this awkward shuffle. Okay, so another fresh crack, and then
fresh crack.
I'm about to pour that all over the microphone.
I haven't said that since the 80s.
Fresh crack.
Pour that all over the microphone. That's not a good start. But the rest of this recording is done
always
underwater.
do crack. But when I do, I make sure it's fresh.
Well, I don't always do.
Isn't that what the orcs said when they were taking the hobbits to Mordor and they had to take a break? And they said, "What about that crack? That's fresh." No? Okay, all right. I'm going to edit that one out.
No, you should leave that in. And I get abuse for my appalling accents.
My orcish accent is terrible. It really is. I want the sound of tumbleweed to be entered in there, just like some Siberian wind sound effect.
Done.
And then crickets. I don't always do.
And then crickets.
I don't always do crack, but when I do, it is always 12 days older than I am.
Oh, so maybe not so fresh.
Not so.
I didn't know where that was going.
Not so. How dare you insinuate something?
Oh, sorry, I didn't know you heard that joke. All
Good
right,
grief. So our final stop on the global release outturn list is. We have gone off-piste slightly. We are on a grain whiskey.
Mm-hmm. So
anybody who knows Single Cask Nation, and that we're kind of a bit fan boys and girls for Invergordon. This is not an Invergordon.
Hashtag woke.
We've gone all the way back to the Kingdom of Fife here. This is from a grain distillery which is shuttered, as some people like to say. This is from the Cambus Distillery. And this is a 35-year-old that has been in first fill STR barriques for 3 years. Mm-hmm. That all-important cask ID number is 150606. Not 601, 606. And
606.
this was distilled an entire, what did I just say, 17 days? Before I shuffled onto this mortal coil in June of 1989. It was a heatwave summer. Nobody in Scotland had any water. And it was, just absolutely roasting.
Wow. And I was in Derby in Englandshire that year.
Apologies.
I was also in Nottingham that summer. And we did a canal boat trip. So you were on the verge of being born, and I was on a canal boat as a 15-year-old.
Oh.
As a soon-to-be 15.
And I was in beautiful Naugatuck, Connecticut.
Watching the flames on the lake like you were in hell.
Cooking three-eyed fish on the fire. It was fantastic.
But you turned out all right.
It turned out all left. That's the problem.
We've got on now. See here, we have decided this is a bright copper,
Yes.
not a burnished or a sanguine.
Not burnished.
Yeah,
Not dark enough for burnished.
But it's got good.
But it is bright.
It's like a sparkly bright, like a deep brightness. Right? It's like
If
plastic
the-
silverware.
If the Tobermory was beguiling, I think this is intriguing. That's really tasty. I know like you said this in your intro, Jess, like we love grain around here. I'm hesitant to call this old grain since you've talked about how close it is to your day of birth.
I am old. It's fine.
But 35 years on this that's a good age.
I would say so. Obviously.
I'm treading so carefully.
I love it. I'm really excited for this to be this number to be even older than I am. It's got a kind of ginger nuttiness. Now I have just swallowed that. It's like a ginger nut biscuit. Is that a thing in America land? Do you have ginger nut biscuits?
Yeah.
And they're
Do we?
Yeah, Moscow Jim makes some cracking
So describe a ginger nut. What's a ginger nut? Is it like a ginger snap with nuts in it, or
they're a bit thicker than that.
No, there's no nuts.
It's a complete
No nuts.
misnomer. There's no nut in it whatsoever. And they're a ginger.
neutered.
I would call them like ginger snaps, like the Swedes, like the Nordics have pepper caca,
okay.
but it's
All right,
what I'm thinking of is like thicker than that. It's like kind of the width of your little finger, and they're lethal. You can't put them in a tub with anything else because then everything tastes of ginger.
there you go. Yeah, I get the
So
I get
good.
the
But even a little bit of molasses will be in there as well.
Yeah.
Like that nice kind of
it's nice.
heavy dark treacle for international listeners.
Can I ask a question of you two British folk? In our official tasting notes, and Jason, you had mentioned what this was to me before, but we selected this a while ago, and memory is what memory does. It goes away sometimes. So in our notes, we say words, and even
That sounds like us.
and even Kranaken sprinkled with chili flakes.
Yes.
So Kranaken. So our overseas listeners are loving this because they know what you're talking about. But for the Americans,
And
what is
even
that?
the people in Scotland are furious now at the idea that we've allowed Americans to put chili flakes in Kranaken. Although I think that might work, Don't lynch me.
That's exactly it. Would work. So
Kranaken.
fill in the gaps, Jess.
Kranaken is traditional Scottish dessert, and in classic all things Scottish, it contains a healthy amount of fats in the form of sugar and cream. Delicious, heavy cream. And raspberries and a bit of oats. And it's one of these desserts that's quite hard to make it look beautiful. But it's usually
like an eaten mess in presentation.
It basically relies on you having some sort of fancy glassware to present it in. Quite often you'll get like a couple of raspberries bunged on the top of it as well, whole raspberries for presentation for the old gram. And then depending whose house you're in, my granny would probably have put still warm out of the oven shortbread on the side of it. It's been like rolled in caster sugar.
Bless her.
So deep apologies to any diabetics listening to this podcast. So that's what Kranaken is. It's fairly heavy. The whole dessert is cold. You can make it and put it in the fridge and then eat it later, or just eat it out of the jug with a spoon or your fingers. I like the idea of chili flakes on the top of it actually, because it would give it like a little kick. Like dark chocolate with chili on it is really good.
100%. Yeah.
So I think that would be nice for this. We've also we've got a little line here about buttered digestive biscuits.
I used to make those for my dad when we were watching the Masters tournament. And it would be a digestive biscuit, then with the butter, and then I would put some cheddar cheese on top of that. And but even just a digestive with butter on it, oofty. That's a rewarding experience.
Like real salted butter, kind of real to spread it, like real salted butter. Is that what we're talking about?
In our house, it would have been all olive oil based spread, but you can imagine it being better with butter.
Yeah, that's what I was asking, because I grew up in a household where butter was extremely forbidden, even at Christmas.
Same.
We grew up with the Vitalite. I think that's what it was called. It was in like a tub. I remember.
Yeah, ours was Olivo.
Oh yeah, that's posh.
Yeah.
The olive oil
really?
one's posh.
Oh,
Yeah, we just
gosh.
had regular person margarine. Yeah, Flora or like some sort of light margarine, which I guess now in woke 2024 we would have to call like a vegan spread or something, because there's
Plant-based.
Plant-based.
Set me up for life.
yeah.
Made from real vegans.
But see, now I've discovered butter. God, it is like crack. It's amazing. But yes, very difficult to spread on a digestive biscuit. You may snap it. There may be accidents. You get it in your whiskey as you crumbled it everywhere. Terrible disaster. So on this occasion, I will permit some sort of olive oil based spread on your digestive biscuit. But leave me the
I think
Kranaken.
it speaks to the text. It speaks to the texture of this canvas, right? Which is, it has a heavy mouthfeel. Like, I think that time in STR has made a difference to the experience here. Like, it is very hashtag drink the whole bottle responsibly. It's very much in that world.
I think it's quite classic. So I was going to say it's quite classic of the style of canvas. Because I think Invergordon has a lot of the sort of more like window putty, sort of more slightly acetone notes that happen to it. And I always think canvas doesn't have that. It's a much heavier, richer, oilier spirit. Not that I've drunk hundreds of canvases, but I would say probably of the half dozen or so that I have drunk, I always find it that kind of like rich, cream, almost creamier, I think, on the palate than an Invergordon is. Sort of really yummy, and it hangs around for a bit, and I definitely think that's also helped by the STR cask. Has definitely added a sort of longevity in the palate for me.
And that's exactly what I was going to say. That this STR cask is bringing things to canvas that you don't normally taste. It sort of builds on what canvas does.
Yeah.
And I love that sort of like fruitiness that it adds to it. But then there's this sort of more warming notes. You talked about the digestives. Like for me, it's like warm oats, right? Just really comforting, yet sweet and indulgent. And it's just all the things.
Yeah,
that's going to do really, really well once people know what it is and where it is.
Yeah, definitely. It's lovely. Was there not? I feel like we did review a canvas. Was there not part of the Macbeth whiskies? There was a canvas there, wasn't there? I seem to remember.
31-year-old. Yep, or 31 or 33. One of those. Yeah.
What a delicious treat that
Excellent.
was. And I think this is kind of building on that. It's lovely. The STR, for those people, I know some people who are a little bit skeptical of STR. I think if you're worried about that, the finish and effect of the STR here is complementary rather than striking. I think it's done a really nice job of kind of boosting that texture a little bit and making it even longer lasting.
I think it brings a berry sweetness to the equation as well. Hence the Kranaken with the raspberries, right?
Definitely.
Exactly. That's why the Kranaken is the dessert of choice.
Pomegranate's good.
Brilliant selections, Jess. Really.
Thanks.
Really excellent, an excellent murder of casks for the global market.
A murder of casks. I'm really excited about getting these out, pouring them in tastings. I'm definitely going to be trialing some of them at Glasgow's Whisky Festival in November. I am looking forward to running a few tastings and getting it out to people, being in stores and pouring. It's a really nice mixture here. I think we've done ourselves proud, if I may say so myself. There's a nice mixture of casks here. So we have bourbon for people who are looking for kind of, bourbon maturation. We've got some funkier numbers here with this STR and the Tobermory's French Oak Barriques. Of course, we have some classic sherry numbers because it's that time of year and people want sherry to warm them through the winter months. And I think we've got a nice kind of play here of everything. So and also some ages. And I'm hoping that I'm not going to put prices on things, but there's a couple of really good little drinking numbers in here that I think people will be very happy to grab in multiples to either gift or have in their drinking collections. I'm
just looking over it. First Tobermory, first Glenmurray, first Black's Boat Bridge for your global market,
first canvas,
first Stoucher,
and canvas.
First canvas for global market.
So a whole bunch there.
Some nice firsts in there.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. Cheers, Jess.
No, thanks. I'm now sat with 3 glasses of whiskey in front of me, so thank you guys for an excuse to come here and educationally discuss them with you and the podcast listeners. And now it'd be very rude to put them back in the bottle, so I'm going to have to drink them all. What a shame.
Yeah, I've got 3 empty glasses in front of me.
Same. Last bit of news before we get out of here. Speaking of coming there, one thing that I wanted to mention, Jess, you'd mentioned Glasgow's Whisky Fest. Jason and I will be joining you at Glasgow's Whisky Fest. So if there's any Padcast listeners who are joining that we've not met, and we've been jealous that only Jess has gotten to meet them, then we look forward to meeting you at Glasgow's Whisky Fest.
I'm phrasing this as by popular demand, because there are 2 or 3 people who every year turn up and are extremely disappointed that I am neither of you. So I'm going to use this as a great opportunity to actually go and try everybody else's whiskey, and you two can do all the hard work.
Find us wandering the festival, drinking other people's whiskey. Yeah, I haven't poured at that event with you since 2019, which was A, when we launched Global Bottles, and B, 4 months before the world shut down.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and before you guys come over for Glasgow Whisky Festival, I am going to be in Poland at Whisky Live Warsaw at the start of October. So that's where you will find me between...
What's your date on that?
It's the 10th and 11th, I think, off the top of my head.
Okay.
So I will have a few goodies that I have arranged that are somewhere between here and Warsaw currently. So there should be some nice things to drink there too. So that's where you can find me for the next. And I also have to give a shout out. Finally, also in October, I've got so much stuff to do before you two turn up. I will be pouring at the Artisan Restaurant in Wishaw. So anybody who's in Scotland and knows whiskey, but I also suspect a good chunk of people on Facebook who do whiskey things will know or have been to or have heard of the Artisan Restaurant in Wishaw that's run by Derek Mather and Fiona, husband and wife team. And
appreciate their SCN support.
And his dad, Willie, who's always in the kitchen helping too. They've got a really lovely team. They have the most insane collection of whiskies. And every month, Derek puts on a whiskey dinner event. So October the 23rd is where you will be able to try some single cask nation whiskies, maybe before they even get to Glasgow Whisky Festival. And some other goodies that I'll pull out of the bag. He does a extremely filling 3-course dinner, and then there's usually a mountain of cheese at the end. There'll be some hopefully above average chat from me and some really nice whiskies. So if you want to come to that, you can reserve a space directly through Facebook, message the Artisan and Derek there. There's a couple of spaces left. It always is a great night because it's a great restaurant, and I'm going solely to eat sticky toffee pudding and talk to some people, obviously. So
is it okay if I just show up for the mountain of cheese?
Yeah, absolutely. Trust me, there's absolutely no way I can eat one of those cheese balls on my own. So you're very welcome to tag team in, come and join in with that. So that's what I'll be. Poland, Derek, and then you guys are going to show up, and we're going to go do some whiskey things in Glasgow too.
There you go.
That's it, November 9, Glasgow's Whisky Festival?
Yeah, that's on the Saturday. And then we'll be in the good old Bonaccord afterwards, I strongly suspect, for some drinks with Thomas and the gang.
Always. Yep, always.
Yeah.
So.
Oh, what a great note to get out of here on. That's lots of things in the future to be looking forward to.
Indeed. Well, Jess, as always, thanks so much for joining us. It's always a treat to have you on and to drink 3 whiskeys with you. Even better. And of course, to Jonny and to Angus, we wish you the best of luck with Kythe Distillery. We'll be watching and waiting and hopefully get some sips along the way to see the progress. And thanks, of course, to our dear listeners, both stateside and around the world. We appreciate you all. Let's get out of here on that. Cheers, listeners, and cheers to you all.
Yeah, cheers, everyone. Ready?
Oh, pro level.
So, in a famous incomplete list kind of fashion, let's see, what have we got in front of me? I have got... Not the Reggie. Wait.
Edit,
Yeah,
snap,
edit.
cut, twist.
Oh, what have I done? I did have all of them in front of me as well. That's very annoying. Hang on. This will tell me.
Edit, snip. That's what my Moyle said.
That's it. That's exactly it. That's why everything's just a little bit shorter for Joshua.
Hey. Surprisingly, he was more the width he was focused on.
Oh my god. I don't know if...
The width? Like he missed it? What don't you have?
It's like in a pencil sharpener.
Or time for this nonsense.
Sorry,
Pencil
Jess.
sharpener.
Okay, Dad.
I like the handle. It was desk mounted.
Ow.
Do you have to like turn the baby as the...
Oh yeah, you turn the baby. That's what you do. You turn the baby. It's a stationary pencil sharpener. You turn the baby.
Oh my god.
This is
We're
gonna be the
definitely
best Easter egg ever.
straight to jail for both of you.
All right, you got what you need, Jess?
Yeah.
Grossed out.
Yeah, so we have a little list.
Leaves a taste.
Here. That's really hard to get out of my mind.